connection. I have with me today Shirley Senn. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Shirley is not only the founder and partner of Purple Bridges, she is also the Chief Community Development and Impact Officer at New Orleans, Firemen's Federal Credit Union in Louisiana,
Yes,
obviously. Welcome.
thank you
You,
very much.
you want to give a little more on yourself and what all you're into?
Sure, yeah. I mean, some days I forget what day it is, but I've been very fortunate in the credit union movement for the last 33 years to really build up into what I'm doing right now. And I spent 20, had to figure 22 years working in the corporate credit union space. But that's where I really developed my love for small and mid-sized credit unions. I started my career in Tennessee back when 1992, I think, when there were over 300 credit unions in Tennessee, and we're around 100, 120 today. But most of those were small, 1.5, 2 million. I can still remember going to what was called Haircutters Federal Credit Union, and my first meeting with them was literally at the barber shop and
That's
turning all the barber chairs to the front with a sheet on the wall to talk, and with my transparency machine and
awesome.
talking to them about ALM. What it made me realize is how important small credit unions are to these communities. And so as I continued my career over the next 2 decades in the corporate credit union space, I really started to kind of shift to working with credit unions that needed filled up membership changes, which obviously brought about business development, product development, strategies, and things, and really becoming more versed in the community needs and challenges. And who would have known that in 2014, right after I got my DE, I didn't really know what community development was at that point. So I typed in community development and credit union, and up popped CU strategic planning. And I thought, that's who I'm going to go work for. So, I found Jamie Strayer, and a year later, I started working with CU strategic planning, which, shifted a little bit of my focus to working with community development, financial institution, credit union, CDFIs. And for the next 10 years, it really showed me how important our community institutions are in those underserved communities, or even in urban areas where we have under-resourced communities and populations. And but obviously the problem that we've all seen over the last 30 some years is we're now down to around 4,500 credit unions. And when I started, there were almost 13,000. And so it's even more important today that we do two things: that we continue to support an environment where we can start more credit unions than we're merging. And right now we're merging around 150 a year, and we're getting an average of 4 started a year. So you don't have to be good in math to understand what that looks like. And so that's really led me to refocusing what I wanted to do, which was figuring out a way to save small credit unions or growing credit unions and starting new ones. But also it made me realize, as we're doing the research, the vulnerable populations that are so critically being served by some of these small credit unions. And so that pivoted a little bit of my nonprofit interest into helping start Purple Bridges, which houses the FiSafe initiative, which is bringing domestic violence survivors and human trafficking survivors into the financial inclusion and mainstream, working together with credit unions and technology and the resource centers in their communities to help them escape financial abuse and get them back on their feet. And so, it's these things are paralleled together very well. And then New Orleans Firemen's was a way for me to engage in working with the CDFI, with a small credit union, and with a team there that is so entrenched in community impact that I couldn't have asked for a better trifecta.
Yeah, that Korean's amazing. Talking
They
with
are.
Jen, she's just a pistol.
Yes, but a good one.
Oh, yes, in a good way. Yes. So much energy. So yeah, cool. That's such a cool kind of uh career path to take. Not, I mean, corporates and then CDFIs and then in a
Yeah,
CDFI and starting a
yeah,
nonprofit. Oh, it's obviously a passion for service that you have. Um, yeah, and so as part of that, I'm going to lead us into the underground.
yes.
The Mitchell Stankovic Underground is happening on October 25th, and it's a group that gives a lot back to credit unions. I mean, they founded CU Pride. Now they've got shared services. They're like actually implementing from a white paper they did last year, and it's leading up to Money 2020, which is such an important credit conference for credit unions to go to as well. So just what what do you see as the significance of that? The tie-in with Money 2020, which now has a credit union track.
I know. I think that's awesome. I was thinking about this earlier because really the last 12 months in particular, I've realized how important not just technology, but financial technology, fintechs are to the credit union space. And the issue though is that a lot of small to mid-sized credit unions get overwhelmed already with what they're doing, that sometimes it's more difficult to look at one more thing they have to add to keep that member experience relevant. And so I really started to just talk about being at all the conferences. It wasn't to, to get free dinners or drinks or to, it was really to network and to understand and to learn. And then be an advocate for the small to mid-sized credit unions, that as these fintechs are developing and looking for their place in this space, that to really engage in those conversations to say, okay, while you're developing this, we need to also run this tracked parallel to what you're doing so that you understand what the small to mid-sized credit unions are and do and how important they are to our movement.
Mm,
And so when you think about that, we now have to start engaging in more than just going to, council conferences every year or our annual league meetings. We need to start engaging outside of just being 100% credit union centric and start getting into these other areas. And so when you think about like FinTech Meetup or Finovate Fall just came on, each of these now has credit union tracks in them, and they're trying to engage in getting more credit unions. But Money 2020 is kind of like the granddaddy of them all.
mhm,
And I mean, where, some conferences may have 500 to 1,000 or 2,000, this one gets, over 10,000. And the underground and Susan Mitchell and her group have really been working actively to get a presence of the credit unions in that space. And we
mhm,
have it now. I mean, in the underground running conjunctively with the Money 2020, I think is really significant because it's important that fintechs, that our community banking partners understand where we are in this space, how we can collaborate. And, while I know taxation is and always will be an issue to some degree, there's also part of this stage that we need to be sharing it with our banking partners in especially communities that are underserved or
mm.
in banking deserts trying to come in and make a presence. And a lot of that's going to be dependent on keeping up with technology. So, having that space at the table is really important. And so it's really encouraging to see that, we're not just being brought to the table, we're actually part of the feast,
Mm.
to speak, and it's really exciting.
And so when I go there, am I going to have somebody nibbling on my leg? Part of the feast.
Well, I hope not.
Uh, so you're going to be on one of the panels at the underground
I
coming.
am.
And so can you talk a little bit about your panel and maybe some of the others that you look forward to hearing from?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the primary point of, I think, this particular underground is a continuation of what we saw in the underground in March with GAC, and then even last year when Mitchell Stankovic was putting the seed for cuss. And I think people that know me know that I try not to cuss, but in this case, cussing is a good thing for the
Okay.
credit union shared services. And so the underground, this point, I think, is is going to be transformational. And when we think about all the different aspects of what it brings, when the significance of the underground, at least to me, is where we really have those tough, authentic conversations in the credit union movement. And it's a
Mm,
safe space where where we engage in really getting what the raw needs are, um, of the intentionality that's needed in making change. And
mhm,
so, when we think about the things that are needed, we need people that are willing to stand up and be authentic about what really is happening. And to be honest, the voices of the small credit unions up to this point, up until maybe even the last couple of years, has been suppressed in
mm,
the credit union movement to a point. And I don't think it's been intentional, but when you think about the fact that, you know, really small credit unions, your manager is also your teller, is also your loan officer, is also the one cleaning the bathrooms, and the last thing they have time for is to spend a week at a conference, let alone the cost. And
mm,
so, I think the movement with the partners is trying to create opportunities for that to happen, but they also need to have somebody that's advocating for them too, to bring their voices up to the top. And so when I think about some of the things that we can engage in, especially in this area, it is going to be talking about topics about
mm,
the small to mid-sized credit unions and how we need to be better, how our larger credit unions, there are lots of them out there that help small credit unions get started or help them grow, but we need more.
yeah.
And since we're going to have those small, mid, and large credit unions at the underground, this is a great opportunity for us to really bring that out, to bring out the importance of succession planning. And
Mm,
this isn't just to fulfill a requirement from NCUA. We need to think about, if we want to keep our small credit unions, we have to help them have plans in place for those managers that have been there sometimes 60 years.
mhm,
I'm working with a little small credit union right now that their CEO retired last year and she's in her early 80s. And and thinking about what's next for them.
mhm,
And so part of having those in conference or conversations to say, okay, CEOs, what can you do to level up to help the next emerging professionals coming in? And what are the resources that you and your board need to think about in order
mhm,
to keep the relevancy of this small credit union? Also, on the other end, I'm not anti-merger. What I am is anti-merger for the wrong reasons.
mhm,
And we should try to keep these small credit unions in their communities, because in a lot of times when it's the small credit unions and community banks also that are filling the needs in what could become a banking desert.
mm,
And, we've got 12, I think it's the FDIC survey, there's about 12.5 million people right now that that live in banking deserts, true banking deserts.
mhm,
And so the only alternative is payday lenders, whether they're, brick and mortar or online. And so, let's step up and let's be real and authentic. And I think this underground is really bringing to light the value and the relevancy of those small credit unions and really coming together using the sixth principle, cooperation among cooperatives, to have those resources that can create opportunities for fractional executives, whereas a credit union may not be able to afford a full-time compliance person, or engaging in having a core and uh, fintechs and other technology that are willing to engage in this circle to reduce costs. To be able to say, hey, small credit union CEO, you're just as valuable as one 100 times your size, and you deserve retirement benefits. You deserve to have a retirement package, because a lot of these small credit union CEOs, don't have anything. They're actually probably giving up or paying into the credit union to ensure that it survives. So there's just a lot of things that we need to think about that are just as important for small credit unions as they are mid to large. And so I think those are the kinds of conversations that really are going to come to light here. And again, we had good discussions at last year's underground about, these are having the courage to step up and say something. And I
Hmm.
think that we're just going to have an extension of those conversations last year. But now we can see after 12 months that we have the tools and they're ready to be presented.
Hmm.
And let's go. Let's get together and start, moving forward with action rather than just sitting around and talking about things.
Yes, yes. And so many small credit unions, I love that you pointed out like deserve to be saved. Like they have a certain level of, financial stability as well as
Right,
the will and interest to serve their members, but sometimes they need that little hand up for sure. And saving by using a fractional CTO or by, sharing negotiating power with other credit unions to get
right.
vendors' prices down can be tremendous for them.
Well,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
And I'm gonna, I've got a shout out for a little small credit union in Texas, 17 million, and they're working with two fintechs right now. There's Starlight is working with this credit union along with Vertus AI,
Mm-hmm.
and $17 million credit union. So a fintech can't tell me they can't work with small credit unions when we've got two fintechs. One, Starlight works to bring a market of $140 billion a year of social benefits that are left on the table. And that's a great way that when there's wraparound services provided by the credit union and financial coaching, to
Mm-hmm.
use these funds to help people get out of poverty and get back on their feet. And then, a lot of times the data that sits at a small credit union, it's so rich. But again, when a small credit union, even a $17 million credit union, when you wearing multiple hats, you don't have time to uncover that. And so Vertus AI is an opportunity for, credit unions that size to have the capacity of, tools that may be warranted for a 500 million or $1 billion credit union, coming down and letting them see what they can unlock and then customize what they're doing for their members.
Mm-hmm.
Their members deserve that just as much as any other credit union does. So,
Yeah.
it's just how you look through the lens of what the needs are and just putting guardrails around. You don't have to reinvent everything. It's just a matter of how do you adapt.
Yeah, yeah. And that's so great to hear because there are so many business partners to credit unions or vendors that I I hear in my consulting business all the time, like they come and they're like, "Oh, we only want to serve the billion-plus-dollar credit unions." It's
Yeah,
like, good luck with that. You got a 1 in 400 like you got competitors who only want them too. So yeah,
right.
I mean, it's much, uh, you know, it, working with multiple ones can be difficult, but by collaborating, those cranes collaborating and working together, make it much easier to be able to serve for the vendors to be willing to serve the
Yeah.
smaller business
Well,
partners too.
and we've been talking about, this is kind of where, again, where the underground really comes, is kind of a nucleus or a core for, the things that need to feed into the small credit union ecosystem.
Hmm.
And, we've been a little bit, fragmented in terms of we've got a lot of opportunities. We have a lot of people that are doing good things. But what is the power of bringing again all of that together and centralizing it so that our small credit unions know where things are that they can tap into? It just makes me wonder how many more credit unions can thrive and survive and thrive when they know the resources are out there and we can continue to refer them to a centralized, whether it's on the internet or through an association, whatever it may be, knowing that they can go to that centralized spot for assistance and know that it's consistent.
Right. And it's so interesting as I've gone through some of these interviews. Um, what's interesting is not only is it credit union purists, but also the credit union realists at the
Yeah.
same time. Like there is a reality. There is a lot of small credit unions, that are getting merged away, and they understand that. And At the same time, they're like, this is possible. Others are like, they're done with, just, push them aside.
Yeah.
What's your argument for those who would say that small credit unions aren't worth saving?
Um, I would say come live in a small town.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see what happens when there's no credit union. I live in one of those towns.
Mm-hmm.
I live in Sparta, Tennessee, and we have a couple of community banks. We have one national bank, US Bank, but they're not really there to serve low income. And yet, every time a fast food restaurant closes or moves out of this town, guess what comes in? Payday lenders,
Mm-hmm.
buy here, pay here's. And the nearest credit union to us is 20 miles away, but that doesn't help someone who doesn't have a car, right?
Right.
And I mean, we've got people that walk to work or are constantly, you can see on Facebook groups, I need a ride to work this morning. Can I pay you $5 to take me? Those
Mm-hmm.
are the kind of people that need credit unions.
Yeah.
And so when someone is not willing to take the time to loan someone $100, $500, $1,000, the only other option is payday lenders. So when someone says, why do we need small credit unions? When you think about what has been the backbone of the growth of this country,
Mm-hmm.
it's been small business. It's been the small businesses and the mom and pop shops in those rural and small communities. It's been in the urban areas that nobody else wants to serve.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, it is those small credit unions that are taking that on. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and if you think about it, every credit union started small.
Yeah.
Some have
Every
just
single one had that.
obviously grown,
Yep.
faster than others. But at the end of the day, some have chosen to stay small because they know that their market is doing those payday alternative loans, is doing those buy here, pay here alternative loans that, maybe are 10,000 and below. And you keep doing those kinds of loans, you're not going to be growing 10, $20 million a year potentially. You may be growing half a million a year. So, and it's so important that we continue to have a balance in this country. When you think about how, the population just has migrated in general, we've got, very centralized and very distinct urban areas, LA, Seattle, Houston, Chicago. I mean, you can kind of see them, but the rest of the country is very rural or small town. And, it's an economies of scale. You do not see a lot of large banks coming into, small town USA.
Yeah.
And when you think about why did Louise Herring, helped start 500 credit unions. It wasn't because she wanted her name in the paper. She saw that there was a need. There was a group that, needed services that weren't being served anywhere else. And, the small credit unions, I think, really are the voice of the historically disadvantaged, and not just in our movement, but in the US in general. And so, when we've got people that are affiliating themselves with the underground again and having those real authentic, very uncomfortable sometimes conversations, we have to be more comfortable about being uncomfortable and being able to work through that, because that's how change happens. Change doesn't happen if we're comfortable all the time. So I will always be an advocate for helping. And I think the thing though is small credit unions, we can only help those that want to be helped. There are some that just don't want to be helped. And, so we have to be smart about where we put our resources too.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So I think you kind of brought it all back to the underground there. Um, so we've talked about a lot. What would be the selling point? What should be the selling point that would get a credit union executive, some credit union leaders to attend the underground and hear all this?
I would say that every one of the undergrounds I've been to, there's always surprises that come out of it. And, the networking, and I know we always say, oh, go to this to network, go to this to network. But if you want to really get down to the nitty gritty of the people that are really to put Their actions behind their words. These are people that will do that, that are
Hmm.
not afraid to speak up. And personally, if I was a small credit union CEO, I want somebody that's willing to just not just stand in my corner, but defend it
Hmm.
and help us, when we have those challenges. And so I think, this is a place where you can really feel like the people you're connecting with, at least on an initial basis, can help you figure out where those other resources are going to come from. So it is something that is definitely worthwhile. I get excited about it. When I first went to my first underground, I was like, what is it?
Hmm.
What are they doing there? Is it like a secret club? And
It is
it is kind of, but
not so
it's
secret anymore, though. Yeah.
no, but when I kind of relate it to the DE program, the Credit and Development Educator program, is that there's a couple of, I mean, I think there's over 3,000 DEs, but there's hundreds of thousands of employees in the credit union movement.
Hmm.
So why does everybody want to be a DE? It's not just, hey, let's just go get a designation. There is an ideology to it, and there's something that really is transforming to an individual when they go through it. It changed me. It changed my whole trajectory of my career. And I think the underground is the same thing. That is, if a small credit union CEO comes there, they will leave transformed, because there's people there that are in their corner that are willing to walk beside them to make that happen.
Yeah, I usually ask for final thoughts, but that kind of rounded it up pretty darn well. So thank you, Shirley, for your time. Appreciate
Yeah,
you being here and also supporting the underground. It is the very important and impactful work that they do, and I just
it
use
is.
it impactful.
Ah,
All right, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.